Dinghai Fusheng Records. Chapter 137. Exorcism. Xian directed the wind talisman and brought himself and Feng Qianjun through the curtain of water. Feng Qianjun floated in midair, completely soaked, as he pulled out the Senluo blade. A storm was gathering in the center of the sacrificial altar of white bone, and a strong breeze suddenly swept through the air. The dark clouds rolled in, and the world fell into darkness. The earth veins swiftly reached towards the sacrificial altar, twining around the bones. In that instant, countless bones of the corpses that made up the altar began to burn in the midst of the earth veins, blazing with purple flames. "Struggle all you want, with all your might," Fu Jian said darkly. "Gu is about to start refining you." And with that, Fu Jian's blood-red eyes flashed, and the corpses of the Qin and Jin troops that had died on the battlefield rose once again. Without distinguishing between their enemies and their own men, they began to hack and bite indiscriminately. This caused a wave of terror to explode forth from the battlefield. "There are drought fiends. Monsters." The Qin troops threw off their armor. They had no more effort to spare to fight, instead fleeing in all directions. "Very good," Fu Jian rumbled. With one hand, he called forth the resentment on the battlefield, feeding it back into himself, before he gathered it once more in his right hand. Resentment went spewing forth, filling the air, skewering Chen Xing's 307 po. Instantly, Chen Xing felt as if black flames were burning his entire body, and he began to shout wildly. "Your struggles will be, in the end, futile." Shu's Hunpo were slowly leaving Fu Jian's body, becoming a shadowy silhouette around which black chi was revolving. His hands turned into sharp claws, and he grabbed Chen Xing's shoulder from behind, opening his gaping, hideous maw. He mocked him. "Once your companions die one by one in front of you, you will understand that falling into this abyss of endless despair will be the only end for this life of yours." At the same time, from outside the formation to the north, Xiao Shan led a large army onto the battlefield. The Qin troops and living corpses that covered the mountains and the plains flooded towards them, and Xiao Shan shouted, "Hear me! Knock your fire arrows!" The Hu troops of Qi Li Chuan and the Dongying troops raised their burning arrows, sending them whistling like a shower of meteorites into that dense mass of people. The Qin army had already been routed, and the battlefield was in utter chaos. On the altar of white bone, Shu sucked away all of the resentment for the first time, before he suddenly opened his eyes. The intimidation of the devil god swept out along the white bone altar in all directions, rushing forth like thick black ink. The wounded began to wail piteously as they were forcefully turned into drought fiends, and the second wave of drought fiend troops stood up again. Feng Qianjun and Xian raced along the northern bank. It was no longer possible to distinguish where the drought fiends ended and the humans began. Feng Qianjun breathed in deeply, and he twisted Senluo Wangxiang before stabbing them into the ground. Immediately, on the battlefield by the Fei River, the trees all around began to shake. They pulled their very roots out of the ground and rushed towards the battlefield. Xian sent a fireball high into the sky, which whistled as it shot through the air. Xiao Shan swiftly looked up at that, and when he saw Xian's signal, he rode his wolf up to a high cliff, facing the altar of white bone in the distance. "I'll figure out a way to get close to them," Tuoba Yan said, and he turned his horse and raced back onto the battlefield. "Chen Xing!" Xiao Shan shouted. Xiao Shan pointed one claw at the sky, calling down a multitude of lightning bolts, which turned into a waterfall of lightning that poured forth from the sky, striking down on the earth below. It set the dense trees that had ensnared the drought fiend army on fire. Xian activated the Kang Lang Pearl. A strong wind gusted along the ground, and the hungry flames began to burn merrily as bolt after bolt of lightning struck. The world had turned into a sea of flames. Chen Xing was still protecting that heart lamp in his own heart, and he panted as he called out, "Xiangshu! Xiangshu! Where are you?" "Xing a voice suddenly said in Chen Xing's ear. "I'm here." You also knew that I would definitely come, isn't that right? Xiang Shu's hair had turned into blazing light, and 1,000 li distant, he opened his eyes, a blue flame revolving and burning in the depths of his pupils. On Xiang Shu's left wrist was the red thread of Chen Xing's shell bracelet, while his right hand had the pendant of Jingguang Liyulai wrapped around it. He had taken the form of the glowing protector martial god, and high in the air, he and Xin Yuanping in Jiao form separated. He turned into a gleaming ray of golden light on the dark battlefield, and he plummeted down towards the sacrificial altar of white bone. Xiangshu! Chen Xing shouted, putting all his might into activating the heart lamp. With a wave of Xiangshu's right hand, the Jingguang Liyulai glowed with light, and the sea of flames in the midst of the battlefield and the lightning that filled the air were both absorbed into the Jingguang Liyulai. Fu Jian's hoarse voice said, in this world, aside from Ji Xianyuan. Xiangshu had turned into a bright flame, and he struck out with a fist towards Fu Jian standing in the middle of that altar. The instant he passed through Chen Xing's body, Fu Jian swiftly pulled Shu's Tuhan back into his body, and with a wave of his left hand, he called out the demonic spear. You are the second person who is lucky enough to receive a blow of goose at full force. The martial god's shield suddenly appeared in Xiangshu's left hand, and it collided with the demonic spear. With a huge pang, the martial god's shield broke into countless pieces. That stab pierced Xiangshu's shoulder, coming clean out his back, sending gold blood spurting forth. In that instant, Chen Xing's pupils shrank swiftly. Right afterwards, Fu Jian turned the demonic spear to the side and shook it unconcernedly, and Xiangshu was immediately tossed to one side. Who's next? Fu Jian asked as coldly as he had before, as if he had paid no heed to what had just transpired. Chen Xing began to shake violently. On the altar of white bone, Xiangshu kept struggling. Everyone watched the scene speechlessly, before they all shouted at the same time. Xiao Shan and Feng Qianjun immediately charged out of the battlefield, dashing towards the white bone altar. Wen Che landed on the ground, holding a broadsword in his hand. With 3 sweeps of his blade, he cleared the drought fiends away, and he, Sima Wei, and the Ghost King gathered. Wen Che shouted, the fire's too strong. We won't be able to get through. Husband. Xin Yuanping in Jiao form flew over, flowing water spewing from its mouth as it cleared a path. Wen Che shouted, you two, with me. Charge. With that, the 3 of them raced towards the rear of the battlefield. Tuoba Yan rushed to the foot of the white bone altar. The martial robe he was wearing had already been cinched in several places. Just as he was about to climb up, Yuan Xin, his entire body blazing with flame, suddenly appeared from within the sea of flames, blocking Tuoba Yan's path. Tuoba Xiang, Yuan Xin said through gritted teeth, it has been too long since I've seen you. Tuoba Yan immediately turned. Yuan Xin pulled out a long spear at that and charged at him, the 2 of them colliding. On the altar of white bone, Xiangshu pressed down on the wound in his shoulder, dragging himself away, leaving behind a streak of golden blood. Fu Jian rasped, where is the Akala blade? Could it be that you have come completely empty-handed? Xiangshu used all his might to reach his hand out to Chen Xing, as Chen Xing gasped harshly for breath. However, black chi billowed forth from Fu Jian's body again, filling the air, before it turned into the hideous form of Shu, whose sharp claw seized Chen Xing and began to drag him towards himself. Xiangshu leapt towards Chen Xing, shouting loudly. Fu Jian, however, raised the demonic spear again, and this time, the demonic spear pierced right through Xiangshu's heart. Xiangshu! Chen Xing shouted. A bright light burst forth from his body, stopping Chu. A strong light exploded out of the heart lamp, illuminating the entirety of the battlefield. The drought fiend soldiers that covered the mountains and plains wailed at the same time, fleeing in all directions. At the foot of the white bone altar, Tuoba Yan and Yuan Xin were caught in a deadlock. Tuoba Yan called the cloud-piercing arrow to him, which shot clean through Yuan Xin's neck, tearing a hole through it. Yuan Xin, however, had his hands wrapped around Tuoba Yan's neck, and he kept tightening them relentlessly. Suddenly, a broadsword came swinging in from the side, chopping Yuan Xin's head off and sending it flying through the air, soaring into the sea of flames. "No need for thanks, little pretty boy," Wen Che shouted, passing right by Tuoba Yan. "Hurry up and go help them." Tuoba Yan immediately charged up the steps to the altar. It was the very same moment in which Xiangshu's chest had been stabbed through by the demonic spear, yet he kept doggedly trying to get close to Chen Xing. From behind, Tuoba Yan flipped over, his legs wrapping around Fu Jian's neck. The cloud-piercing arrow rose from below the platform. Fu Jian immediately spun the spear around, and with a stab, he pinned Tuoba Yan to the floor of the altar. The second, Shu's hoarse voice said. "Who is next?" Wen Che, the Ghost King, and Sima Wei all struck out with their swords at the same time, gathering all of the martial arts they had practiced in their lives into that single downward strike that came down at the altar. The altar collapsed. Tuoba Yan, with blood dripping from his mouth, willed the cloud-piercing arrow up with a crook of his sword fingers pose. The arrow shot through the altar of white bone, rising from the ground to pin itself at an angle through Fu Jian's heart. Not in his wildest dreams had Shu thought Tuoba Yan to be capable of such a thing, and he immediately began to bellow. In that brief moment of respite, Chen Xing leaped towards Xiangshu. Xiangshu's soul was already beginning to leave his body, and he immediately grabbed Chen Xing's palm, gripping his fingers in a crushing grip. The two of them slowly started to fall as the altar collapsed into the flames below. Xiangshu studied Chen Xing, his physical body slowly falling as his soul left his body behind. In the moment where life met death, his fingers caught the ring at the base of Chen Xing's ring finger, and he turned it slightly. The flames of the heart lamp exploded across Chen Xing's body, and its light shone in all directions. The mana in his body was pouring endlessly into the tide ring, and he widened his eyes. Xiangshu turned the tide ring in a very minute circle, and in the blink of an eye, the altar of white bone rose straight up again. Xiangshu's soul returned to his body, and he took on the form of the martial god once more. The demonic spear first left Tuoba Yan's body, returning to the moment it pierced through Xiangshu's chest, before it pulled itself out, and the wounds on Xiangshu's body began to heal. Tuoba Yan looked down numbly, only to see his fresh blood flowing backwards and his wounds healing. He returned to the foot of the altar, and the cloud-piercing arrow flew back, landing in his hand. Yuan Xin's head came flying back, attaching itself to his body. His hands wrapped around Tuoba Yan's throat again. "No need for thanks." With a strike of his sword, Wen Che separated Yuan Xin's head from his neck. Before Chen Xing had figured out what exactly had happened, Xiangshu had already dodged Shu's blow, one hand pressing against the wound on his shoulder. He shouted, "The heart lamp!" As Shu stood, dumbfounded, for that single moment, Chen Xing ignited the heart lamp with all his might. Its light shone forth brilliantly, and the wound on Xiangshu's shoulder instantly healed. Tuoba Yan charged up the steps to the white bone altar, pinning Fu Jian to the ground. The two of them worked together, each of them holding down one of Fu Jian's arms. Below the altar, Wen Che cut it down again, and Xin Yu and Ping came charging over, shouting, "Quick, go!" The altar being cut down destroyed the drought fiends all around it. The bones glowed with the light of bone phosphorus as they rose into the air, and Xiangshu held his arm up horizontally. With a flash, Jingguang Liulai took in the light of bone. Chen Xing flew away from the collapsing altar of white bone, looking down at the ring on his finger. "Don't touch it again!" Xiangshu shouted as he spun in the air. Chen Xing immediately flew to his side and said, "Beat the devil heart out of him." "The devil heart is in Fu Jian's chest." Xiangshu turned, wanting to hug Chen Xing, but his arms closed around empty space, and he realized that right now, Chen Xing was nothing more than a soul. "Don't hurry back into your body just yet," Xiangshu called. "You can do that after you give the heart lamp to me." Don't get close to Chu again. The altar of white bone collapsed, and Fu Jian stood up amidst the sea of flames, his eyes blood red. Tuoba Yan, who was covered in flames, had already started to charge forth with a spear in his hands. The demonic spear appeared in Fu Jian's hands and he watched Tuoba Yan. Xiang Shu, no matter if you are Fu Jian or the god of weapons, Gu Wang has wanted to land this punch on you. Xiang Shu flew downwards, sending a punch right at Fu Jian's face, bellowing, for a very long time now. Fu Jian held the demonic spear at the ready, turning it in his hands until it was a huge, spinning ball of black. The two of them had made their preparations, and they ducked to avoid it. The Ghost King, however, dashed forward. Fu Jian startled, and the Ghost King used his own body to forcefully take that spear blow. Your body of flesh and blood will not do, god of weapons, the Ghost King intoned. Choosing a mortal to be your vessel was your greatest error. Xiang Shu, right now. Sima Wei charged forward, colliding with Fu Jian's chest, sending him flying backwards. The Ghost King locked his wrists and stole away the demonic spear, while Wen Che came charging in from the side, slicing through the air with his sword. In the end, you are all creations of Gu. How dare you struggle against a god? Shulakong. Even if you have the protection of the Ziwei star and have been born as the ruler of men, you are still naught but an ant in the face of a god. Fu Jian chuckled coldly, resentment exploding from his body that instantly sent the two drought fiend kings and Wen Che staggering back. Xiang Shu and Tuoba Yan, however, were still living, so they were not afraid of that resentment. They came charging forward, one after the other. From behind, Tuoba Yan grabbed Fu Jian tightly around the neck, while Xiang Shu raised a hand and called over Chen Xing's heart lamp. His hand glowed with golden flame, and he pressed it to Fu Jian's chest. Chu's voice bellowed wildly, and his eyes were bloody red. Your Majesty, Tuoba Yan said through gritted teeth. Wake up. Countless drought fiends burning in the flames came charging forward, leaping on Xiang Shu. A burning mountain of corpses flooded forward, crashing down over the three people in the middle of the battlefield. Xiang Shu circulated his power, and with an explosion of the spiritual qi in his body, sent the drought fiend group flying away. Fu Jian, however, took that chance to attack first. Even if the body I have taken is that of a mere mortal. Fu Jian completely ignored Tuoba Yan behind him, turning to the side and lifting a leg, sending Xiang Shu flying backwards with a single kick. Gu cannot be taken down by mere mortals. With that, Fu Jian reached back, his hand coming up to cover Tuoba Yan's neck, ready to twist his head to the side. Tuoba Yan whistled quietly. The cloud-piercing arrow shot out of the sea of flames towards Fu Jian's heart. Fu Jian jolted, no longer able to pay any attention to Tuoba Yan. Just as he was about to reach up and grab the cloud-piercing arrow, another silhouette burst through the sea of flames with a dagger in hand. He stabbed it down towards Fu Jian's chest, turning his body to push his arm aside. Murong Chong ducked, dodging the cloud-piercing arrow shooting at him. The arrow buried itself quietly into Fu Jian's chest, piercing through the devil heart. Its momentum was not halted, however, even as it embedded itself in Fu Jian's heart, because it then pierced through the chest of Tuoba Yan standing behind him. Tuoba Yan's eyes went wide, and a sorrowful smile lifted the corners of his mouth. He released Fu Jian and slowly crumpled to the ground. Brat! Wen Che rushed back. The Ghost King immediately fell to one knee, checking over Tuoba Yan's injury. It's no issue, Tuoba Yan said. It hasn't pierced my heart. I'm all right. Fu Jian stumbled, and one of his hands came up to wrap around the cloud-piercing arrow. He lifted his head disbelievingly, before turning his head to look at Murong Chong. Resentment dissipated in all directions, and the flames filling the world slowly went out. Xiang Shu stood up and Murong Chong struggled to his feet, while the Ghost King slung Tuoba Yan's arm over his shoulder and brought him to one side. The drought fiend group surrounding them had already fled in all directions, and Xian, Fei Tian Ye, and Xiao Shan came racing towards them. Everyone stood in a circle around Fujian, leaving about 100 paces between them. Chen Xing's soul floated down. A hush fell over the world, and everyone watched Fujian fixedly. A cruel smile appeared on Fujian's face, and he said darkly, "Very good, but just with this, you all will not be able to stop Gu." And with that, Fujian wrenched the cloud-piercing arrow out, tossing it to the ground. Xiangshu immediately shouted, "Scatter!" Resentment immediately exploded outwards as Chu left Fujian's body, his two Hun shedding their bonds. Chen Xing, however, had been waiting all this time for this very second, and he immediately made the lamp seal with his hands, the light of the heart lamp spilling forth to shine out across the world. Moths to the flame. Chu's voice boomed out. After leaving Fujian's body, his resentment had grown almost tangible, and it began to billow wildly across the battlefield. Wherever it went, no life could survive, and once again, that huge heart appeared in the midst of the battlefield. Xiangshu turned to look at Chen Xing, up high, and his lips moved slightly. "Do you still wish to struggle bitterly?" The demonic spear rose automatically from the ground. The refined Akala blade shone with the light of metal as it rose, calling all of the discarded weapons lying on the battlefield, flying towards Chu's devil heart and gathering around it. Hundreds of thousands of weapons formed a black giant of metal that rose from the ground, and resentment billowed from it up into the sky and down into the earth vein. "How do we fight it?" Fei Tian Ye asked in disbelief. "Martial God." Xiangshu replied decisively, "Strike the weapons from his body." Xiao Shan let his lightning loose, Xian called up a strong wind with the Kanglang pearl, and Fei Tian Ye rode the vines into battle. But with an incensed roar, the god of weapons, Shu, waved a hand, and his arm once again became a whirling torrent of weapons that began to sweep over the entire battlefield. Wen Che shouted, "Attack!" We might be able to pierce through his resentment. Xin Yu and Ping went flying forward to clash with Shu, blood splattering across the scales across his body. "I am the world," Shu bellowed. "I am the way." Each and every one of them called upon all their skills, but every time, as soon as they scattered the weapons that made up Shu, the weapons would regroup on their own under the influence of that resentment. And from tens of thousands of li away, an endless stream of weapons came flying towards the center of the battlefield. In this moment, the weapons of every Hu and Han soldier on the battlefield left their hands, flying towards Chu. Chu's form grew larger and larger, and with a slight wave of his hand, his fingers, like little mountains, dissipated into a rain of swords and blades, which flattened the entire mountaintop. Xian shouted, "He's currently drawing power from the divine and earthly veins. We have to break that connection." The divine veins billowed above, while the earth veins flowed below. In this moment, Shu was one with the divine and earthly veins, and was thus one with this world. The devil god's consciousness was everywhere, influencing every inch of ground on this divine land. Xiangshu flew into the air, shouting, "We can't hold out. Help by us sometime." Xing Xing Chen Xing was floating in the air. He did not reply to Xiangshu, instead shutting his eyes. In this moment, his soul was glowing with a beautiful light, and the burning light of the heart lamp shone forth from his hand. That light flowed oddly, extending vertically up and down in front of him like a band of light, reaching up to the vault of the heavens and down to the earth veins below the ground. In that moment, within the divine and earth veins that were suffused with resentment, the heart lamp, like the relentless tide, began to exorcise Chu's Hanpo. Under the dark vault of the sky, Shu let out a thunderous roar. Chen Xing opened his eyes and said quietly, "God of weapons, return to your devil heart. You are not the world, nor are you the Dao. I am." Chu's bellows were like thunder, but a brilliant light shone out across the world. The light of the heart lamp filled the divine and earthly veins, and a miracle was born within the huge wheels of time of the divine land. They seemed to resonate with the tied ring on Chen Xing's hand, and a bright light burst out over the world. The shadows of the mountain range vanished. Light flowed through the deepest reaches of the earth. The vast seas glowed with a gentle light, and millions of living creatures looked up at the sky at the same time. In that instant, Chen Xing floated in the air, his long hair billowing outwards above his white robe. The heart lamp was glowing with its absolute maximum of light, as if the image of Dipankara was about to appear. All magic will eventually fall silent, but time stretches on endlessly, Chen Xing said gently. Only the light of the heart lamp will shine on as eternally as the light of the day. The last light of the heart lamp vanished, becoming one with the spiritual chi of the heavens and earth. In this moment, there was nowhere the heart lamp's light did not reach. I'm leaving it to you, Chen Xing smiled. After he handed over the heart lamp, he leaned back, and his soul flew some thousands of steps away, returning to the horse carriage. He swiftly opened his eyes. Chu's spiritual and earthly hun were expelled from the divine and earth veins, and they returned to the devil heart. He then chuckled coldly. So, what will you do now? Xiangshu hovered in the air. He lifted his right hand, and with a twist of his wrist, the light of the heart lamp blazed forth. It melded with the spiritual veins of the world, and its energy poured into him endlessly. In this moment, his martial god power had reached its maximum, and his robes of gilded gold once again appeared, forming a golden skirt of armor cinched in at his waist and his flowing cloud warrior's boots. His upper body was bare, and a piece of armor in the shape of a dowdy hung loosely over his heart. He looked as if he was Akalanatha descended to this earth. I'll send you off, Xiangshu promised. In the next moment, the Jingguan Liulai reversed itself. The 6 kinds of light, the light of the sun, the glow of the moon, the shine of the stars, the flash of lightning, the blaze of flames, and the bone phosphorus, were all released. The sea of light filled the world, instantly engulfing the entirety of the divine land. With that, Xiangshu's left hand briefly brushed over the shell bracelet, and the indigo light of the blazing flames from the abyssal kill revolved around him, becoming a ring of circling flame like the inside of a kill. The blue flames gathered, forming a symbol, and under the feet of Xiangshu appeared the sword-forging array. Exorcism Department, heed my orders. Xiangshu shouted in midair. All of the exorcists held themselves at the ready. Take down the weapons that he has protecting himself. Xiangshu ordered. Everyone cast their spells, starting to attack Chu. Chu left a trail of dispersed weapons, resentment spewing from his gaping maw, as he charged towards Xiangshu. Chen Xing leapt onto Xin Yuanping's back and flew across the Fei River, towards the center of the battlefield. Xin Yuanping, you no longer have the heart lamp. Chen Xing replied, I still have artifacts. Xiangshu. This time, let me be your protector. Right after, at the very moment that Chu charged towards Xiangshu, Chen Xing twisted the ring very slightly. Time surged backwards in that instant, and Chu was dragged backwards relentlessly by some odd power. He turned angrily. That scene was very odd to witness, and he looked as if he was constantly shuffling through repeated moments froze. Xiangshu pressed his fingers together in a sword fingers pose, lifting one of his hands over the top of his head. Light shone forth from his fingers, the 7 divine lights that filled the world, and under the power of the blazing blue flames, they were gathering towards his fingers. The group of exorcists continued to strike out wildly with their magic, and Chu's body began to fall apart, turning into weapons that whistled as they shot across the battlefield. Finally, Chu could control himself no longer, and he charged towards Chen Xing. You're seeking death. Xin Yuanping, who was carrying Chen Xing along, was just about to fly away, when Chu reached out with a huge hand formed from weapons, which darkened the sky. He was on the verge of grabbing them when Xiangshu suddenly opened his eyes and shouted, "Seeing er!" But just at this moment, a glowing, green outline escaped from Chen Xing's body. Kong Xian stepped out of the world of dreams, and as he turned in midair, he transformed into a peacock and flew into the air. Immediately, Shu had no attention to spare for Chen Xing, instead shooting a hand forward. It left behind a flood of weapons as it shot towards the peacock that was flying away. Xian immediately shouted, "Quickly!" This move had basically cut the ground out from where Chu stood, and his body began to disintegrate even faster. Kongxian, however, did not leave the battlefield, instead dodging and weaving between the swords and blades, diverting away the blades that made up Chu's body. The moment that Xiangshu gathered those 7 divine illuminations back to him, the 9-word incantation, under the power of those blazing blue flames, began to separate from his arm. At the same time, a phoenix's cry came to them from the distance. Chongming had arrived. Chen Xing shouted excitedly, "Chongming! Chongming!" Xiao Shan turned his head. All of the exorcists on the ground looked up at once. The phoenix came flying from the east, ahead of the light of dawn that stretched like an endless sea of fire. Its feathers, which flapped as it flew, brought with it 1,000 rays of golden light, and tens of thousands of birds came flying towards the battlefield, carrying embers in their claws. They let loose a torrent of blazing flames that plummeted down to strike Chu's body, and the god of weapons' body once again scattered. At the end of the eastern sea, there came a peal of metal clashing on metal. A huge kun beat its 16 wings, spewing forth a dense fog as it led countless glimmering silver flying fish towards the center of the battlefield. It breathed out a wild gale. With that huge boom, and with the combined efforts of the exorcists, Chu's body finally disintegrated fully, revealing the devil heart inside. "No, I will definitely not today," Chu's deep voice bellowed. That devil heart called up a dense layer of resentment as it tried to sink into the ground, but Chen Xing turned his head and saw that, saying anxiously, "Don't let it escape again." But suddenly, a small branch appeared in Chen Xing's hand, and green leaves sprung forth from it. It flew towards the ground beneath the devil heart and stuck itself into the ground. Instantly, a towering tree burst into existence, the melody of a sun accompanying it as it coiled around the devil heart, firmly trapping it in place. "Wang Hai!" Chen Xing exclaimed. The last bit of power that the shepherd god had left in the human realm had actually made it so that the devil heart was unable to move at all. Xin Yuanping sent Chen Xing high up into the air, where Xiangshu slipped an arm around him. "You've done it," Kongxian's voice said, before he spread his wings and flew into the clouds. Chu immediately gathered up all of the fallen weapons and formed a wall with them, blocking them off from the devil heart. "Where's the weapon?" Chen Xing asked. "Actually, I didn't need to involve myself in this chaos." Xiangshu turned to embrace Chen Xing fully. He said quietly, "No, you had to come, because forging this sword uses what I have protected for my entire life." In that moment, Chen Xing understood as well, and he finished, "The belief that you have fought for." "Correct." "Because of you," Xiangshu replied easily. The flame that burned on his forehead danced, and the two of them looked to Chu at the same time. Xiangshu's right hand formed a sword fingers pose, and the weapons that had once made up Chu all rose into the air, creating a loud hubbub as they flew towards the two of them. With that, every weapon across the divine land, in every corner, every saber, sword, arrow, halberd, spear, dagger, they all rose into the air, crossing thousands of li of land to fly towards the battlefield. In Jiankang, the sword of the emperor that had been placed on the weapons rack rattled in its sheath. Sima Yao came over swiftly, only to see the emperor's sword leave the sheath, glimmering with a cold light as it flew out of the doors and into the sky. The doors to the storehouse of the Ministry of War exploded outwards, and tens of thousands of weapons came rushing out. Qi Li Chuan, Dongying, Yuzhu, Luoyang, from every corner of the world, countless people came racing out as they watched their weapons fly into the sky. Even wandering journeyers who carried swords saw the weapons at their belt leave their sheaths of their own accord. The tip of the blades pointed at the sky, and they went streaking through the air. In the blink of an eye, Shu and Xiangshu had each gathered up tens of thousands of weapons in the world. Shu said darkly, "Since that's how it is, let's see whether it will be the might of the god of weapons which unites the divine land, or if it will be you arrogant." Shu abandoned the weapons that made up his body. Xin Yu and Ping cried, "Watch out!" Xiangshu and Chen Xing ignited their mana at the same time. Chen Xing's hand pressed down slightly and the martial god shield appeared once again from thin air, turning into a huge shield that blocked the torrential rain of weapons that flew up at them from the ground. But those weapons that scattered in all directions did not turn around and return to Chu's body, but were rather taken away by Xiangshu. The sky above the battlefield was already packed with the glittering weapons, and they loomed above like a dense layer of dark clouds. The thousands of jin of mortal steel began to plummet down towards the ground below. As he recited the protector martial god's incantation, Xiangshu flicked his fingers, and all of the weapons gathered above their heads. The weight of that small mountain of weapons began to collapse in on a center point, turning into a huge sword that spanned the distance between the sky and the earth. "Xiangshu, Akalanatha. Lend me your divine power." Behind Xiangshu, the image of Akalanatha pressed its hands together, and the 9-syllable incantation seeped in 2s and 3s into the body of the sword. "Chen Xing, Dai Pankara. Lend me your divine power." Behind Chen Xing, the image of Dai Pankara clasped its hands, and across the mountains and seas of the divine land, all light was extinguished as it gathered in that huge sword. The world sank into an endless darkness, and there was only the glittering brilliance of the huge sword. The devil heart's barrier had already been lost, and it let out a wail of horror. The huge sword came down slowly. Chen Xing and Xiangshu each reached out with their left hands. Chen Xing grasped the hilt of the blade, while Xiangshu's hand wrapped around the back of Chen Xing's. The shell bracelet reflected the bright light of the sword. The two of them then pushed forward as one. Exorcise. There was a bright flash of light, and the sword pierced through the devil heart. That sword strike connected through the passage of 3,000 years of time, cutting through the vast endlessness of the mountains and the seas. The huge revolutions of the divine and earthly veins seemed to stop in this moment, sweeping through the human realm and cleansing it of the sorrows and regret that filled it. That strike was as blinding as the first ember of flame that had appeared with the creation of the world, but it was also as weak as the last, tranquil gleam of light reflected off a crystal of ice at the end of the world. Its light spread in all directions, and resentment disappeared in the face of it. Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, the devil heart crumbled. Chu's spiritual and earthly hun transformed into 2 balls of black fire, which were pinned to the ground. The light that had spread itself through the world returned at that, and all the tools in the world that had been forged as weapons became new Akala blades. Xiangshu and Chen Xing landed on the ground. Their hands were clasped as they came to the center of the battlefield. Points of light from the heart lamp were slowly drifting up off the Akala blade, dancing as they dissipated through the world. Chen Xing stared dumbly at the heart lamp. The divine sword was still here, but the heart lamp, since it had accomplished its task, disintegrated into the world. End chapter.